Welcome to the Tales of the Orient, where we explore spine-chilling horror stories from Thailand. Today's episode is titled The Haunted Museum Trip, a haunting journey that begins with a simple trip to the north and ends in a nightmare. Tonight, we follow Alex and his friends as they encounter supernatural horrors during a trip to a northern province in Thailand. It all started 15 years ago. At that time, Alex was in his last year of high school. He had a girlfriend from the north who would go back home every year. This year, Alex wanted to travel, so he asked to join her. His girlfriend agreed and even invited her friend, Brian, to join them. Brian, in turn, invited his girlfriend, Karen, along. It's worth mentioning that Brian was known for being fearless, liking challenges, and being dismissive of superstitions. Thus, there were 4 people on this trip: Alex, his girlfriend, Brian, and Karen. They decided to visit a province in the north. The trip started at 10 p.m. from the bus station, arriving at 4 a.m. When they arrived, the girlfriend's father picked them up and took them to his house. Everyone was excited as they had never been to this province before. The next morning, the girlfriend decided to take everyone around the town, starting with a revered temple near her house and then the provincial temple. She also thought of taking them to a well-known museum the following day. They took 2 motorcycles, with Alex and his girlfriend on one and Brian and Karen on the other. Alex, who was somewhat sensitive to spiritual matters, happened to see that Brian was headless while they were riding. He kept this to himself. When they arrived at the museum, a volunteer guide led them to various sites, including a monument and a small shrine. They eventually reached an ancient weapons room with a teak panel. Alex lifted the panel and asked the guide what it was for. The guide explained it was a panel used by the city lord to call servants and that the room below was once a rebel prison. Alex noted this, but didn't mention seeing a black hand beckoning from the panel earlier. They moved on to a dimly lit hall with chains and shackles on the walls. Brian, known for his bravado, put his hands into the shackles and pretended to be a prisoner, mocking the situation. The guide warned him that the chains were considered sacred and actually used in the past. Brian dismissed this, challenging the existence of ghosts. The guide could only continue the tour. They entered a larger room, a former execution chamber where prisoners were once placed in spiked baskets and kicked to death by elephants. While the guide explained, Alex saw a tall man's figure with a hook in his chin, looking tortured, but he remained silent. After the tour, as they were leaving, Alex saw a prisoner's spirit riding on Brian's back, which unsettled him. He suggested they return home. That evening, during dinner, Brian seemed unusually quiet and eventually vomited, claiming he had smelled a corpse since leaving the museum. They went to bed in separate rooms. In the middle of the night, Alex was woken by Brian screaming about chains dragging around the room and feeling suffocated. Brian claimed to have seen a prisoner's spirit sitting on him with clasped hands and offering incense, flowers, and candles. The next morning, Brian asked to stay with Alex as he was too scared to go home. Brian continued to be haunted by the chain sounds and the spirit's appearances, unable to eat due to the constant smell of death. Eventually, Brian stayed at Alex's house, but disappeared by morning. Alex, worried, went to Brian's house, finding him terrified and eventually witnessing Brian shoot himself in despair. Alex ran to get Brian's parents, who revealed Brian had died by hanging the day before. Alex was shocked, having spoken to and seen Brian the previous night. At Brian's funeral, Alex volunteered to stay with the body overnight. He was haunted by the sight of Brian and another figure with chains around Brian's neck, laughing menacingly. The next day, Alex noticed chains on Brian's chest during the final rites, which everyone wondered about. After the funeral, Alex returned the chains to the museum, where the guide confirmed they were indeed the same ones from the museum. This tale serves as a grim reminder of the power of the unseen and the importance of respecting the past. We received a chilling story from one of our listeners that echoes today's tale. To recap, tonight's story took us through Alex's terrifying encounter with a vengeful spirit during a seemingly innocent trip. Thank you for tuning into the Tales of the Orient. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Follow us on social media for more updates and spooky content. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss any new content.